Hello, and welcome to the Video Game History Hour, presented by the Video Game History Foundation. Before we get started, just want to let you know this is kind of a different episode. We are actually filming this episode in person. Usually when we do these, we have everyone in their webcams in their separate offices, but we actually have a very special guest with us here today in person, who is an artist. So we're going to be looking at some things. It's going to be kind of a visual episode. If you're listening by audio, we will try to describe it as we go so you're not left out, so we're not just like gawking at something on the screen and you can't see what it is. But we should introduce our guest here, a longtime video game artist, game designer who is out here in the area, worked on a whole bunch of well-known classic titles that we'll actually let people see those as we get to them as we go along here. But you worked for Sega Technical Institute, you worked for Insomniac Games, you've had a whole career all over the place. Please welcome Craig Stitt to the Video Game History Hour.
Very glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
All right.
This is what, your third or fourth visit here? Can't get rid of you.
Well, the reason we have you on this episode is because you actually let us digitize a lot of your collections. I think we announced this already, but we have, I think right now it's called the Craig Stitt Art and Design Collection, that it's your portfolios of work from your career that we've been digitizing. We're going to make accessible to people.
Yes,
so
yeah.
We'll probably time this episode when we launch that collection, hopefully in the very near future. We'll see when this episode comes out. But we figured what we do is we wanted to talk with you about your career anyway, but we figured let's go through some of the stuff we've scanned. Let's actually take a look at some of the art you've done, some of the various artifacts from your career, just kind of use that as a jumping off point to talk about your work.
I love the word artifacts.
Material sometimes. Don't want to make it.
No, it's somehow very fitting.
Phil just called you a mummy, I think. I have a question, Phil.
Yes.
Are you also using this as an opportunity to get context for the library, or has that work already been done?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
There's a number of documents that, I've been going back and forth by email with Craig where it's like, what's this thing that's not labeled? And you've said, oh, it's this XYZ project. And we've got a couple of those, but there are some other things where, you've told us some stories. So when we look at it, it's like, oh, it's this project you did. And we don't really have that. So this is kind of an excuse to get you on the record about some of that as well. So we have that history captured.
And it's good for me, too, because seeing different stuff in different contexts stirs up different memories and that's always a good thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even when we were assembling your collection, there were some things where it was like art from this one game intermingled with level designs from another game. And it was a lot of process like what goes where and what actually works out.
Yeah, for anybody listening to this or watching this, my number one suggestion is date everything, put your name on everything. Take notes. You have no idea what's going to be important and what you're going to be looking at 20 or 30 years later.
Consistently, all the questions we had were about things that you didn't put dates on at the time.
Yeah.
But the ones you did put dates on, it was great. It was super easy to do. So
on some of those, I had to kind of retroactively go back and do a best guess date. Because,
because you got it. But it's still...
Yeah, it really does help. I mean that in all seriousness. If people out there, and it doesn't even matter if it's game industry stuff, whatever you're doing... date stuff. And
it's a love letter to the future person who's got to look at it. So,
yep.
So let's jump into your career. So I want to start with this little artifact here.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So this is one of your very early portfolio pieces. This is before you even worked in the video game industry. We see a bunch of film slides of art here from various things at university or at San Jose State, various computer art you did. How did you get into doing art for video games? Where did that start?
That's what this was for. I was married at the time. And I got a call at the little computer graphic company I was working with, but they were doing like business graphics. So it was mostly like pie charts and kind of boring stuff.
Right. Before everyone had PowerPoint, right?
Yeah. And these computers were huge and they were heavily air conditioned. So you're in these little rooms, gloves, hats, hoodies, trying to stay warm while you're working. But she called me and says, I found your dream job. And she, because I'd come home every day and she'd have the newspaper spread out and the want ads and have stuff circled.
Right.
And this one she actually called. And it was Mark Cerny had posted an ad for STI, Sega Technical Institute, that basically said wanted video game artists, no experience necessary. Video game and game designer artists, no experience necessary.
That must be the last job for a game designer, no experience necessary. That's
yeah, I got really lucky. What it was Mark had convinced Sega and Sega America and Sega of Japan to open up STI, and he wanted to do it his way.
Okay.
So he wanted to bring in artists and designers and programmers from outside the industry so that he could teach them to make games his way.
Well, because it's the Institute, right? That's why it was called that.
That's always been confusing.
Well, I thought it was almost kind of because there's sort of a kind of a foreign exchange program element to Sega Technical Institute.
Yeah,
as well, right?
that was the other key thing. The team was half Japanese, half American, roughly, and the original idea was that Japanese would come over from Japan, and we'd send over some Americans to Japan for this kind of cross-pollination, so that Japanese could learn how Americans made games, because a lot of the Japanese games just didn't sell here. They're just culturally alien. Some of them are really cool, but they're weird. And then we were going to send some Americans over to Japan to learn their process. And so throughout my time at STI, a lot of the team, half the team was Japanese. We never sent anybody, unfortunately.
That part of it didn't happen.
That part didn't happen, at least to work. But so that was the core of STI. Was Mark wanted to do it his way, and he wanted this cross-pollination of teams.
Interesting. And
I want to stick on the your portfolio.
Yeah. So what this was a portfolio I put together. That audiovisual company I was working for. That's these top two slides. Occasionally we'd get actual artwork.
And it looks like it is digital graphics. It says here, like, created on I've never heard of a Genigraphics 100D Plus as a combination of vector and raster-based artwork.
Yeah, it was about the size of it was like the whole corner of your office here, and about $100,000, and you worked on 8.5-inch floppy disks. They actually were floppy disks.
So I have this is a question just for me, because I'm really interested in this personally. How did you get that art onto film?
That was because back then, the way all this worked was everything got put on slides, on 35 millimeter slides. Right. And that was what the company did. And then because most of the time for the business meetings and these big corporate events, they weren't shooting video, they weren't showing video, they were projecting. They were projecting it via slides.
So how did computer graphics get onto an analog slide?
There was a machine.
There was a separate room with a giant room-sized machine.
Somebody else did it, and could print them out. So that was all part of the process.
Got it. That's something that it's just a personal area of interest for me. Is that weird era of technology?
I remember there was a little machine. You just slip the slide in, and it would. It could photograph from the top or the bottom.
Oh, so it's photograph. Well, that's photographing a slide, though. But how do you photograph the screen?
Oh, wait. So how did they?
That's right.
Frank, we should just do an episode about your like.
I'm looking at the machine now, and I'm just like, well, no, that's the slide. I don't remember.
Well, Frank, you're very into like those kind of like photo printer television things. Let's just do an episode about that, about the history of that.
I haven't completed my research yet, but okay. All right.
But we also have here another artifact that I think is super interesting. That's the wrong way. There we go. This was the napkin where it looks like it's the notes you jotted down from your call with Mark Carney, as he wrote down, but Mark Cerny. We have tastefully censored his phone number. I don't know if he has the same landline number now, but we just don't want to take any risks. But yeah, this was, you just had a call with him, right?
Yeah, this was literally a sticky ticket. I can see myself in my dad's garage, and either Mark called or I must have called Mark, and so I just grabbed whatever I could, and I'm scribbling notes down as I'm talking to Mark about what he would like. Yeah. Because at the time I applied for both the game design and the artist positions.
Right.
And I also originally was thinking that this was in fact for arcade machines.
Oh, okay.
So at first I was very disappointed when I found out it's for the home system. I'm so glad I was doing the home system now versus arcade stuff.
Where the business died out in like a couple of years after that.
So this is me scribbling notes at the workbench.
The cocktail napkin with words written on it, like attributes, alien busters, who knows what that even means at this point. I do see Golden Axe written on there, so clearly there was some conversation.
He may have thrown some ideas out, because it was interesting. Probably by the time I get this call, it's like, okay, now this is serious. He wants to see something from me. I had not at that point the most recent home system I had played would have been a Atari 2600.
Okay.
Hadn't played Nintendo. I don't think I'd even heard of the Genesis yet, because it was also brand new.
Yeah. Right, 1990, yeah.
And so I called a buddy up and I borrowed his NES and sat and played games nonstop to get some idea what I was getting into.
Picturing you going to the interview with Mark Cerny being like, have you heard of this Super Mario Brothers thing? Oh my God.
Exactly.
But you mentioned you applied for the design job, and this was part of it too, was we have these docs from a game. I think, was this like a proposal like for the job? Was that?
What Mark wanted for the game design position, he wanted to say, okay, pitch me an idea. And he gave me some outlines of what he would expect in that. And so I came up with this idea called Poisoned.
There's a drawing of like a lizard man leaping into the air holding a rod of some kind.
I'm trying to think what's in that. Is that the antidote? I can't remember what's in the rod.
There's a whole plot description. We have up here something with like, players and selectable characters and the weapons you're using, but you had designed a whole like theoretical document for a game.
Yeah, and there's some I don't know if you got it here, but there was some it was a side scroller. It's very basic, very derivative.
Yeah, we have them here now. It's layouts for a couple levels. You were thinking very economically. The names of these levels. There's like level 1 of the pier, which is then reused for level 9 Return to the Pier. But this is like, it's beat 'em up style levels where it's like a side scrolling environment. You just walk from left to right, and I assume it would have been that style, like Streets of Ragey kind of thing. But this is the complete map of Poisoned as you drew it back.
Yeah. So it was. Looking back at it, I'm glad. I was honestly very disappointed when I didn't get the design position. But once again, it's one of those things in hindsight, looking back, I'm glad I didn't. Because one, I'm more of an artist. I'm not. I really don't play. I didn't play and don't play enough games to be a good game designer. Where you've got to try all this stuff and see what works and what doesn't, all these different flavors and colors and shapes and sizes of games out there. The good designers know them all, and it's kind of part of their DNA.
Well, it's interesting because in a lot of the research we do, we hear from folks who, were sort of outside of the game industry who had interesting game ideas because they didn't have that experience.
There's both sides.
I'm curious if you had not sat down and played, Nintendo and Genesis, what your proposal for a game would have been. This like extremely out there high concept.
As we get further in, when at Sega a few years later, I am still pitching ideas and then at Sega, at Insomniac, still pitching ideas. So maybe I need to take back what I just said.
You're the best possible designer because you have no preconceived notion. You don't know about what a roguelite is now.
I'm thinking outside the box because I have no idea what's in the box.
You did understand, to Phil's point though, there was limited ROM space for tiles, so you were immediately on that somehow.
Yeah. So continuing through STI, you have, again, a bunch of proposals for things. And one of the big ones we have in there is you had a proposal for a game that went by a couple titles, Segapede, Astro-Ped over the years. We have some concept art from that, some design documents from it, starring this, for folks who can't see it, this little mascot character, this little yellow and blue sort of cybernetic centipede guy. And you had a design document that was under the title... Segapede, The Death of Robotnik? So how did this come about? What was the story here?
This from exactly what we just said is I did end up pitching stuff. So this was this was like pretty immediately after Sonic 2 had shipped.
And also I realized we're kind of I need to jump ahead a little bit because we didn't talk a lot about that. I'll jump to that. For folks watching a video, ignore these things. We're going through a lot of slides really quick to get to Sonic the Hedgehog 2. There we go. It's a very nice, not drawn by Craig Stitt, but a nice picture of Sonic and Tails. That was your first big project at STI?
That was only my second game ever.
Okay, wow.
So the very first game was Kid Chameleon on the Genesis. So I'm always really impressed when I meet somebody that knows that game. It did well at the time.
What was your contribution to Kid Chameleon?
Artwork. So I did about a third of the little characters that you turn into when you put a helmet on, because the character was this little character named Kevin, and you put a helmet on and you get the powers of that helmet. And so I did about a third of those, like 4 of those guys, and then about a third of the environments. And this is very classic side-scrolling.
It's a very meaty game. There's a lot of content.
It's huge. That was Mark's primary. One of the things is he wanted the largest or the longest video game.
It seems like there's like 100 levels or something.
That's hubris.
1,800 screens.
Is that a real number?
Yeah. However they measure that.
I just want to point out the maps we were just looking at were like 20 screens.
Yeah. Then there was 100 somewhere. I've got you guys have it and when you've scanned it. would have been the cheat thing, how to teleport between levels.
Right.
And it is 100-something levels.
There's a lot of content in that game.
So the very second game I worked on, and this comes right back to Mark's, that whole, one of the core premises or foundations of STI was Japanese American teams. And so Sonic comes out, and Sega had no idea. I guess they wanted a sequel. And so
the first game maybe was successful a little bit, yeah.
And so Yasuhara, the lead designer, had come to STI on his kind of, let's go work in the States for however, 6 months.
Having previously worked with Mark in Japan. Yeah.
And then Yuji Naka, who's the lead programmer, was having butting heads with Sega and had quit Sega, or was threatening to quit. I think he quit Sega. And all of a sudden, Sega needed him back for Sonic 2, but he'd worked with Mark and was friends with Mark. And Mark said, hey, why don't you come to the United States? And so that's how Sonic 2 got done here versus Japan.
Right.
And how this artist that had only ever made one game in his life ends up as an artist on Sonic 2.
And you were doing zone design, right?
So doing the artwork for the zones. So and I got there's two of them I did. Oil Ocean, which is in the game, and then I did Hidden Palace Zone,
which I think listeners to the Video Game History Hour are probably familiar. I'm just going to assume you watching this right now know what Hidden Palace Zone is, but that was a zone that did not make the final.
Did not make the final. And I was to this day, it's still some of my favorite artwork.
Man.
And I was heartbroken, angry, pissed that it got cut. Right,
It looks 3D rendered almost.
It's
you did. The angles on the.
I'm still really happy with that artwork. And it's back in the game.
Yeah. It's canonically back in the game in a way that to me is very kind of interesting and weird, which is that I might be wrong. I think you looked into this once, but I think you either can't or it's very difficult now to purchase a version of Sonic 2 that doesn't have the sort of like fan-made restoration of Hidden Palace in it. So it's like it's kind of become canon by being this legendary thing that got fans really interested in reverse engineering this game. They ended up getting a job with Sega bringing Sonic 2 back, and along with that they restored that level, but the map data they have is like 5 screens or something. Yeah, right? They had to like extend it, and now it's just canon.
Yeah,
it's just one of the weirdest things in video games.
When I was told, the original reason I was told it got cut was memory.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And but it was more, hearing more down the road, it was more they didn't have time to finish it gameplay wise. And so, and I guess story, because it had a whole thing with the Chaos Emeralds and
there's a whole time
Super
travel.
Sonic and
go watch our video about the lost levels of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Frank goes into that in great detail.
Yeah, but even after that, there was I would love to still play that original concept
with the time travel.
The time travel, the dozens of worlds, and
you guys would have never finished that.
Never would have finished it.
No, still be working on Sonic 2. Yeah,
but anyway. I was told it was cut, but it physically was still on the cartridge in a very rudimentary and kind of busted face.
Yeah, the collision is there. But the art is not there.
Yeah, but people could use, was it Game Genie, Game Shark, Game Genie?
Yeah, you could use that to get into, like I said, the broken level. So like the collision's there, but there's your art's not in the cartridge ROM at all.
But that spun up that interest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, then people found the earlier builds of it that still had the art, and
so that kept it all alive and kept it going.
Well, again, it's like, not to pause on Hidden Palace forever, but like it and I get into this in that video, and please watch it. But I think the mystique around this level, which is, it's literally called Hidden Palace, it's something that people thought might have been hidden in the game. Turned out it was sort of hidden. Like, there's this whole mystique around that level that inspired a lot of people, and that includes me, at least partially, right? That like, looking at like my early access to the internet and seeing people talk about this is going to sound weird, but like, that's the first time it occurred to me that humans made video games. You know what I mean? That like work could be unfinished, right? And
which is probably a very common way, because of thinking about things. If you're not involved, whether it be movies or books or whatever you're whatever you love of this. Oh, this is
you
this
see
is
like
the
a
thing.
mistake or something behind the scenes. It's like, oh, this is just people.
People buying.
Yeah.
Very human people.
And, like a lot of, the sort of reverse engineering and the way that we study old games through reverse engineering code and seeing how things work, stems from people's interest in this level. And that's kind of an odd legacy, I would think, for you, right?
Well, I consider myself extremely fortunate. One, that Hidden Palace Zone survived and has flourished, actually more so than if it had been left in the game.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
But I had 2 levels, and then you had Brenda Ross and
Tom Payne.
Tom Payne,
yes.
Who huge amount of work on levels that got cut completely.
Yeah.
Well, we've realized now
Never shipped anything.
Within our collections, I mean, we have right behind me, if you can see in the video, we have the VHS tape Brenda Ross had with some of her Sonic 2 art. But we have Tom Payne's work that he did on Metropolis Zone. And so we kind of have...
this is something that inspired me early on.
It's
and
true.
I've now finished clean slate. I've digitized everything that the 3 American artists who worked on Sonic 2 kept. I'm done.
For audio listeners, we have still been on this Sonic 2 art because we don't actually, from your collection, you didn't have anything from your Sonic 2 work that we
There's
could find.
Very little. There's a few thumbnail sketches. In fact, I don't think I ever gave you guys. I've got one sketchbook that has some very rough sketches.
Oh no, we haven't seen those. Okay.
So the only
take back what I literally just said. I haven't digitized
everything. the one thing that's in that sketchbook that I've done a quick. Did I scan it or just take a picture of it? Because it's a sketchbook. It doesn't fold out. It doesn't scan.
No. Yeah.
Is they say, okay, we want Sonic 2 to be 2-player. We need a second player. And so Yamaguchi came up with Tails here. And by the way, Yamaguchi, great artist, good guy, easy to work with, and a machine. He just didn't stop working. He lived at but so I pitched an idea of a little turtle. I think he named him Boomer or Boomy.
Boomer,
and
okay.
It was going to be... It would be kind of like a jet-powered hoverboard. So he was kind of slow. That was the whole speeds, rabbit hair kind of mindset.
Sort of an irony to it.
Yeah, but then the idea was that he would, the turtle could drop down, pull on his legs, and, what's the Japanese monster? Gamera. Pull the legs in and could fly, and jet engines would shoot out of where his legs were. And Sonic could ride him like a power surfboard over pits and spikes.
Oh, so this is interesting. So much like Segapede, you were kind of going for like one of Robotnik's robots kind of turned good.
I mean, he wasn't robotic. He was just, he was a superpower.
Got it. Okay.
Actually, that's a good transition though to go back to Segapede.
But yeah, back to Segapede. So yeah, Sonic, that one shipped.
Sonic 2, you worked on Spinball as well.
And Sonic Spinball, which was actually, this got, if I remember my timelines correctly, this got put on hold in order for me, because they needed people for Spinball.
Got it,
yeah.
But yeah, so I pitched this to Sega, and they liked the concept, which was my original concept, and I would still love, the original concept was so much better than the kind of hacked story I ended up having to come up with later. This was, Robotnik was fooling around with Chaos Emeralds, and they blew up in his lab, and he was saturated with Chaos Dust, and was dying.
I'm reading the doc now. It says, this powerful dust in this purest of forms was too much even for the doctor's body to metabolize.
Yeah, so this was one of my favorite movies, was the old Incredible Journey? Fantastic
Voyage.
Fantastic Voyage. There we go.
We got there, yeah.
One of my favorite movies that I can't remember the name of.
The Incredible Body movie, yeah.
Where they shrink down and they go inside. And so that was my idea was here, but instead of Sonic doing it, is Sonic had a friend that was one of the little badniks that was this nanite microscopic centipede that would then go into the body. And it also goes back to the very first time I ever played Sonic. So this was, an early beta, early alpha
of Sonic 1.
Of Sonic 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd sit down and look at it, and we'd play it, and play it for a few minutes and go, wow, this is really beautiful. I wonder how they did that. And we'd all go back to work. Because I can't remember if there was rings in it, but there definitely was no ring splash.
When you get hit and they all shoot off.
Yeah. So, however long, weeks or, a month or two later, we get the updated version with the ring splash in it. We're now fighting over who gets the controller.
You're not the only person I've heard that from. I think it's hard to think about now if you maybe weren't there at the time, but that was like that effect. There was nothing like it.
Yeah,
in video games.
It changed the game from this is a pretty game, but it's just another side scroller, to holy cow. No, I'm not done playing yet.
Yeah.
Give me I'm hanging onto my controller. And so I wanted to play off that. So Zip here, our little Segapede character, his body was made up. So he was on just a single little roller, like a unicycle, but a ball bearing. Mm-hmm. And his power-ups were the segments of his body that each were on a little ball bearing. Oh. And each segment would have a power-up on it. Extra engines or rocket launchers or spikes or something. And you would collect those, and your tail would get longer and longer and longer. And then you'd get more powerful because you've got all these power-ups. When you got hit, your body would fly apart, and all those body part segments would go rolling off, and you had to grab them just like a ring splash.
Got it.
I can't wait for some extreme fan to look at this image in the archive and figure out which Sega PCB you color coded.
But so this
is really good question.
But when you were talking though about him shrinking down, this is one of those environments. We have our Segapede guy going on like a little purple loop that might be something in Dr. Robotnik's body.
Yeah, this would have been inside Robotnik.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's
and as Frank said,
we're in his body.
Yeah, that's in his body.
This would have been inside Robotnik.
That's why it's like organic, but it's got the computer components in the back, including, as Frank mentioned, the background is some circuit board
that I Xeroxed in.
Took out of a closet. Sega.
Yeah.
So you had a couple projects you were proposing. There was Segapede. There was also one I've never heard of called Spellcaster.
Yeah.
What's the story of this one?
That was actually before I pitched Segapede, and that was with another artist. Brain going blank. Another, it was programmer. Dave. Sorry, Dave, can't remember your name.
Dave, you're listening. Please email us at dave@gamehistory.org.
I can see you, and you turned me on to some great music. But anyway, so he and I got together and pitched this idea where it was a Street Fighter kind of game. But
one of these.
But the difference being that you could interact with the environment. So you could, if the guy was standing on a pedestal, you could blow up that. If you're on mounts, I think there's an image. One of the images, you're riding these giant dragon heads, and you're fighting.
Right now, we're looking at someone in a purple cloak shooting a laser, but then we also have someone in like an orange cloak who's using some barrier to like curve what looks like air shooting out of like a vent in the ground or something. Like there's a little air bending going on. And
yes, once again, you're interacting with the environment. So here that they're somebody. I guess the guy in the purple has summoned some power from the well. But then the other thing was the whole gameplay, the as far as button pushing it was music based. It was sound based.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
So you're pushing you're playing music when you're pushing the buttons. So your opponent can hear what you're casting.
Interesting. Got it.
Hence giving you just a small moment more of, counter play. And unfortunately this one didn't get beyond. We got together. We pitched it to
just paper pitch.
Yeah,
which we have here talking about that. Yeah. Thing we just saw is called the Pit of Fiends, and it's a discussion of how each wizard has to like choose to use their time in a different way to control the power that comes out of the pit. Not a vent. It's the Pit of Fiends. Let's be specific.
Pit of Fiends. But
disrespectful to call the Pit of Fiends a vent.
I know.
Probably a big deal in the Pit of Fiends community. That's don't want to bring that one up.
Yeah, but this one, so this one didn't make it past the initial pitch to the Sega of America's executives.
Right.
But then I came back just with myself and did the Segapede pitch, which they liked. But they wanted to see more. They wanted to see a proof of concept. And so they gave me a programmer and said, I don't know how, it wasn't very much time. You've got, a month or 2 months to give us something. And so Ken Rose, who was the programmer, got to work really fast. And I have, just by random chance, this completely finished set of Sonic artwork sitting on my desk, begging to be used. So I had so this proof of concept looks like a finished level.
Because is it just hidden palace or the background?
It's hidden palace.
Okay,
it's just, I had to make some new tiles, but in general, I did 2 months worth of artwork in a couple of days because it was done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought no one would ever see it again. And so we had a playable proof of concept prototype that looked like a finished game. And and it's still buggy and it's twitchy and it doesn't have all the features because Ken had to like bang this out really fast. And Sega saw that, liked it, gave it the go ahead. Excuse me. Except they go, oh yeah, we don't want it in the Sonic universe.
Oh, okay. That's why it became Astro. What was
the Segapede was a spaceholder name anyway.
Oh, okay. That's right. It's like Sega and Sonic are two separate words.
Yeah.
My brain was like, oh yeah, that's but no, it's something.
That was just a space holder, and so that they were at so okay, real name Astro-Ped, and so I had a whole bunch of different ideas of what now you could do instead of going into Robotnik. I still really like that idea. Wish they'd gone with that. And so that's when we went about a year, 14 months total from the time I started to before they went, STO was like way overbooked. They had like 5 or 6 games trying to be done with.
So this is the time of what, like the Ooze Comic Zone,
Ooze Comic Zone, all those,
all the games
Spinny and Spike,
where people are like, all right, that's on Sega Genesis. Actually, we do have here some art you did for this game called Spinny and Spike that there's very little information about. So what you explained the premise to me by email, but what was Spinny and Spike?
This is Porky and Wacky Land, is what I'm looking at.
Well, this was Steve Voides and Jason Plum's 2 programmers.
I think Brenda Ross was also involved.
Brenda was probably going to be doing some artwork on it as well. And it was basically Steve wanted he really just liked the boss fights in games. So that's all this was going to be, was locked screen boss fights. And you had Spinny and Spike with these 2 little characters, but it was the underrunning idea of the game was the Nightmare King.
Okay.
And so the Nightmare King is coming and giving kids nightmares, and then I don't know if he's trying to steal I don't remember the details, but steal their soul or whatever.
Like a very work safe Freddy Krueger scenario. He's giving them nightmares so we can steal their teeth or something less horrifying. Yeah.
So this was woodshop. This was like the classic school nightmares of you can't remember your locker number, you don't have your pants on.
And to put a description behind it, I agree with Frank. It's like if people have seen Tiny Toon Adventures, it's like Dodo's Wacky World, but there's like vice grips coming out of the ground, and there's like a giant saw, and there's nails and hammers in the background. It's like an abstract version of everything that would have been in shop class, giving you
because these would have just been static or more or less static backgrounds to the boss fight.
So this was Cuphead before Cuphead is what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You said earlier you don't play games. So.
Timing. No, but that one rings a bell. I'm trying to think if that was.
Well, Cuphead was a more recent game that is like largely boss battle based with elaborate handmade backgrounds.
Okay, I think when I first came in, you guys were showing me that because and I was like, yep, that's it.
So past Spinny and Spike, well, we're Sonic 2 again. We're going to keep going. Try to remember what we have. This was also in your file from this period. This was interesting. You had a lot of reference art from specifically this Super Famicom magazine that had a lot of bespoke cover art. I don't know if you recall why you had copies of this.
I just liked the artwork.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the thing about archives like these, right? It's like, it's not like you made a file for the future, right? It's probably, you tell me, it's probably more like when you left STI, it's just like, what is still in my desk that either goes in this box or in the trash can?
Yeah. Well,
right?
some of that is, these covers, because there's this one girl, don't know who she was or what her name was in whatever.
But she's like the main character. It's actually looking at her design. She's wearing an armor that looks like a Super Famicom controller, and she has earrings that look like the Super Famicom like colored circle design.
I remember having she's hot. so any of the covers that had her on it, I'm saving off on the side. So
I think that's the end of what you have for the Sega era, though. So after that,
unfortunately, I don't have a lot from there.
But at that point, then that's when you move over to Insomniac, and it sounds like what was the story there for moving from Sega of America to Insomniac?
Part of it was when Segapede, Astro-Ped got canceled. Mm-hmm. I was because we'd been kind of starved for resources and people, and it just really was not supported. And so they pulled that, and I went on to do work on Spinball. And Comic Zone. I went on to I think it was Comic Zone. I got pulled. Astro-Ped got.
You did a little colorization work on the ooze.
Comic Zone. All I really did was clean up and do some color fills for some of the animations.
Okay.
And then the ooze. Actually, I did a bunch of the backgrounds, and I actually did the first time I remember hearing about the ooze was Mark Cerny approached me and wanted a set of cells, a set of little tiles to animate the ooze. It was this kind of, initially it's like proof of concept kind of thing again.
Yeah.
They wanted to see if they could do it. And then it turned into a real game.
I kind of like the idea of like, oh yeah, I did the ooze from the ooze. Like that's the very specific.
That incredible, highly complex character design.
So that must have been prototyped much earlier than it came out.
Yeah, that goes way back.
Because Mark left during the production of Sonic 2.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so that goes way, Yeah, so
interesting. So it's like a prototype that was just kicking around.
It wasn't. It was just a kind of a. Will this work?
Yeah, and you mentioned like STI was backed up. It's like the ooze, take your number. You are number 6 in line while you're working on Spinball and all these other projects. So that goes in the key for a couple of years. And
I think one of the reasons it always amazed me a little bit that the ooze of all these games is the one that shipped.
Yeah. And I gotta say, when I was a kid, I was amazed that the ooze shipped. Like,
did you even know what that meant?
What, the ooze?
For a game to ship at the time.
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, I just saw it in a magazine. I'm just like, I remember being like surprised that this was a product.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because it's just like, who's the, like even as a kid, I'm like, who's the character? It's this blob, like I don't care about this.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the reasons it survived was if I remember it had a small team, and Dave, whose name I can't remember.
Sorry, Dave.
Dave and Jason were the programmers, and they were the one. They were the ones had worked with Mark to push the idea. So you had the powerhouses behind the whole concept working it, and so you had a small team and that kind of stuff, and so it had the kind of the inertia and. Who knows what other reasons it got?
Yeah, I think
I'm glad it did for them, huh?
Dave Sanner.
For audio listeners, Frank was just quickly looking at his phone and figuring it out.
Games.
Thanks, Moby Games. I think it makes sense. I mean, not just the fact that there were people who were like, emotionally invested in the project, so to speak, but also, I mean, you mentioned the first project at STI was we are going to make the largest video game ever made. So maybe it makes sense for a smaller project to get through. But you ended up leaving.
So I was butting heads with Roger Hector, who took over from Mark Cerny. Nice guy, but issues. And he and I were kind of butting heads. And
by this time, you were working on concepts for like next generation stuff, like Saturn games.
Other people were.
Okay.
I wasn't yet. I did something I completely forgot about until somebody put. I put my videotape resume in. I finally got scanned and threw it up online years ago.
Was that Sonic concept that's in there, right?
Well, yeah. Then somebody pointed out, what's this Treasure Tales game? And I went, what? Yeah, and there was a Tales adventure game called Treasure Tales that I completely forgot about. There was going to be a kind of the three-quarter view, what's the word? Isometric.
Right. I'm thinking like Sonic 3D Blast looking kind of game, yeah.
And so I mocked up some screens. And I remember doing lots of research on for the artwork, and that's all I can remember. I know I've done some search through and found a programmer's name here and there and some other people. I've even contacted Yasuhara because I figured he had to have something to do with this. And he's like, he said that time period is a blur. I was so overworked, I don't remember anything. And then Bill Willis was one of I think he may have been the game designer on it. So but he doesn't remember anything Wow. So I haven't been able to find anything about it other than these screenshots.
Fascinating. Well, you literally today before we recorded this, you brought that tape by, so we're going to get a higher quality
nice,
version of that. Hopefully, we can get a better idea of what that thing actually was.
But yeah, so that that got. But then, so I remember going into Roger's office, and because morale at SCI was really low, and for lots of reasons. And I remember talking to Roger, and for like an hour and a half. And as I left, I got about 3 steps out the door, and I realized I'd spent the last hour of that apologizing to Roger for it all being my fault. He had some superpowers. Roger, he really did. And I literally walked from that meeting to my desk and called Mark Cerny. I said, wow. Mark, what have you got? I need to get out of here. What have you got? And that's where he says, well, I thought he was still in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And he goes, oh, well, I'm in LA. I do have a group that needs an artist.
And that's Insomniac.
That was Insomniac.
Going to Insomniac.
Yeah, before so they were working on on Disruptor. It was just the 3 lead guys. So Ted and Al and Brian Hastings, Ted and Al, or Al and Brian Hastings and Ted Price. It was just the 3 of them.
Yeah, and you did some concept work. As we have some here from Disruptor. This was the cover design, it looks like. Was this your also sketching it out? Okay.
Just some rough ideas.
It's a very stick man in front of the cover with notes about lighting behind head and for I assume what would eventually become the final version. But there was that. You also did a lot of character contests we have in the collection here too. This is a very Terminator looking guy, and again, thank you. This is dated February 1996 at the bottom, very clearly there. Let's zoom in for
signed.
There's a name.
Yeah, and you got your signature.
Now, I can't tell you that I actually signed and dated it. Actually, I may have on these. What's interesting because a lot of that groundwork had already been done by the time I came on to Disruptor. I mean, I was their first. Ended up being their first employee, but they'd had some contract artists in.
They were the founders. They had contracts, but you were the employee.
So when I came in, I was contract because when I went down, I really wanted to work with Mark again. But there was in LA, and my son was 6 years old at the time, and I went, I can't move to LA. And they made me this deal, like, tell you what, come down for 3 months. We will put you up down here, and we'll fly you home every weekend.
Oh my goodness!
So you can still see your son, but you're still down here during the week. I'm like, wow. I can. I'll do that. That's 3 months. Yeah. Awesome.
I'm just all the things you've managed to get into your career. It was like the no job experience necessary designer. Like, hey, I'm trying to find a gig, and they're like, okay, we'll pay to put you up in a hotel. And work for us.
I mean, I've been so fortunate. It amazes me some. But anyway, that 3 months turned into 10 years with Insomniac and 25 years in LA.
Clearly, I was going to say, clearly you moved there at some point.
But yes and no, I moved there, but for my entire time at Insomniac, I'm still flying back and forth every weekend.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
So Insomniac paid for that for the first, I don't know how many months. And then, I went, they asked me if I wanted to go full time. I think I'd been there about 10 months or maybe less. And Ted said, would you be interested? I think as soon as we finished Disruptor, he's like, hey, do you want to go permanent, and we'll still pay for your flights. And I'm like, yeah.
This is a weird question. I've just wondered for people who have that kind of situation. Did you start to know the security agents and the pilots? It's Craig again. Jeez.
I was fully expecting that.
Okay.
I didn't, because it was Southwest Air, and I really expected flight crews, but they must rotate their people and their pilots. Once or twice, I remember recognizing a female pilot's voice. Like, oh, okay. I did get to know other passengers.
Oh, is there other people who took the going back to San Francisco every weekend trip?
Specifically, there was 2 kids. There was like an 8-year-old boy and like a 12-year-old girl that they were on. They were doing the opposite. They were flying to see their dad, where I was flying to see my son.
Oddly enough, they were also working for Insomniac, and they were covering that expense as well. But you did some of this art in Disruptor. And again, it's like a robot guy. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. But that was, it sounded like that was the project that you were coming in to do. Yeah. You did some other art. I love this one here for other art in Insomniac. This was
the Christmas card for Insomniac.
It's just like a really grotesque monster guy who's like Santa, but his sleigh, it's got, instead of reindeer, it's got these weird spiked. Were those things from Disruptor?
Those are characters from Disruptor.
Okay, those are all characters from Disruptor.
That's interesting too, is because, like I said, a lot of that work had already been done, the character design and all that kind of stuff. And I remember walking past Ted's desk, and he was trying to sketch out. There was a new character enemy design, but it was just text, and so he was like trying to visualize that. And Ted was an incredible 3D artist on the computer. He was awesome. Could not draw. And so he's like, And so without even asking, I just went over my desk and scribbled up something really quick and came back and showed it to him. He just went, oh, that's awesome. He just handed me the stack of enemy designs. These are yours.
Whoops.
And so it was like, so then here I am, wow, I'm getting paid to sit here and draw monsters. Awesome. It doesn't get any better than that. Yeah, so these are these were characters that enemies I did for Disruptor that I threw into the Christmas.
And this is a print, so is this a scan of the actual card?
Probably.
This is a scan of the actual card.
This is the actual card.
Yeah, so you can see the kind of, you can't see this in the video probably, but it's very dot matrixy in terms of the quality.
That would have just been done in Photoshop of just scanning in those images and cutting and pasting and sticking them all together, as opposed to an actual drawing.
So you didn't draw the beasts six times?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole reindeer sleigh here of
Got it.
What are those called? Rigors.
Rigors, okay.
Which is actually Roger, as in Hector, backwards.
Oh.
Wow, you don't even work with the guy and you still got that.
Rigor just sounds like a good name.
Oh, it was an awesome name. And then this was a Barsoom, which is Edgar Rice Burroughs' name for Mars.
From John Carter, yeah.
So
did not get sued by their estate, which congratulations. But after Disruptor was done, this is when you come to the next project. There's something called Insomniac 2. They are taking pitches for a new game.
Yeah. So we had finished Disruptor, and which we got wonderful reviews and didn't sell at all because they didn't advertise it. And so at that point, there's just the four of us in the company, the three guys that started the company and me. Mm-hmm. And Ted says, "Okay, everyone go to your corners for," I can't remember how long it was, a week or 2 weeks, and come back with what you think we should do next. And so, if I remember right, Ted came back with an alien invasion game, which I'm pretty certain probably eventually came back as Resistance.
Okay,
on the PS3. Yeah. Al Hastings came back with an off-road racing game because in Disruptor, part of the game takes place on Mars, and there's these Martian dunes, and it turned out to be really fun to just run across the desert and catch air off the top of the dunes.
Oh, okay. So he's thinking in practical terms.
How could we change that and make it into a game?
Yeah.
And I don't remember what Brian's idea was, but anyway, mine was where you're this little you not little dragon, that didn't come yet, where you are the dragon, the player's the dragon, as opposed to fighting the dragon or riding the dragon. You are the dragon. And in the original pitch, you'd start out as a hatchling, and the whole point of the game was to collect gold and build your horde. And over the game, you would get bigger and bigger and grow until you go from this hatchling to this kind of smog, Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, fire-breathing, magic-using dragon.
And we have your design document here. Is one of the things you scanned. Yeah. This was for a concept. It says it's called Lifespan. It says high concept. You are a dragon defending your lair throughout the millennia from the ever-advancing hordes of humans and their machines, I think is what it says.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's interesting because, you go through here of all the eras, and I was really struck going through this because, it starts out in the Ice Age. It says maybe early Viking era, and you sort of walk through these eras. And one of the notes I have on here, you have like Age 1, Age 2, Age 3. One of these is Age 5, Civil War. You were pitching a game in which you are a giant dragon in the Civil War fighting against people.
Yeah, well, because all of a sudden you got these Confederate soldiers, the Union soldiers, and here's all this gold, and they're trying to steal it from you. And at the same time, besides just defending that, you've got to go out and collect more gold, or find some yummy princesses to eat, or all the classic dragon stuff.
Why are you finding a princess in the Civil War?
There's earlier eras. There's
a Southern Belle. You had to go find a Southern Belle.
There's Dark Ages. There's Bronze Age. There's different. The New World's the invading Spanish armies. Takes place in South America in the jungle, and eventually goes to the present. I think if we
go all the way into
goes to the future in the year 2200. Yeah. I think it's just great that one of the pitches was like, hey, let's reuse this thing you did, and it's like, no, let's do a game that takes place over 10,000 years.
Yeah. Well, and so we pitched that. In the group at Insomniac, the three other, we all decided to okay, let's do the dragon one. Everyone liked my idea, so we polished that up pretty much as is. I would still love to play that game. That whole you're the dragon and you got to go collect money and come back and hoard and grow.
Yeah.
And so we polished that up, pitched it to Universal Studios and Mark Cerny, because at this point, so Insomniac's distributor was Universal Studios, and they really liked it. But Mark made, and these, this is Mark's superpower of seeing what was going to be needed down the road, and he made two suggestions. Keep the dragon the same age, are, so don't age them out.
Because like after this, you kind of revise this to be one where you grew up from a baby dragon.
Yeah. So you're going as you're going through. The original idea was you'd start off in the Ice Age as a baby dragon, and then by the time you got to the future battles of where you're dealing aliens and spaceships or whatever those worlds, that's when you're now this ginormous magic using dragon.
So Mark was like, just keep the dragon one age.
Keep them, because sequels will be easier.
Yeah.
And I went, never even considered the possibility there could be 2 of these.
Yeah.
So sequels. And then the other one that really made the huge difference was keep the game. I can't remember. I wish I could remember the words he used exactly, but family friendly. Keep it
brand
cute.
safe. Yeah. Not brand safe, but yeah.
But keep it cute and family friendly, because by the time in the 2 years it'll take you guys to do this game, the average user of the PlayStation 1 will have come down a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And so, my original game was this not realistic, but more, I'll say traditional video game look and feel, a little darker, some cool dragons. And he goes, no, keep it cute, keep it fun, and keep the dragon the same age. And so that went from my, dragon span, lifespan idea to we started reworking it to come up with what ended up being Spyro.
I think we have a document. I don't think it's on here, but where the name was Bob the Dragon originally.
It was Pete.
Sorry, Pete, not Bob the Dragon. Excuse me. Pete,
to correct that one, everyone's just like, oh, you could never get away with that. Disney would sue you. It's like, well, okay,
Pete's Dragon.
Pete's Dragon. But, 2 things. One, that was never meant to be.
It's the first thing I thought just now when you said it.
And also,
it's
Pete's Dragon.
Oh, I get it. It's a
play on it because it's Pete's Dragon. The dragon's name is Elliot.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole play. We never planned on him naming him Pete. On the other side of that, though, it took forever to come up with a real name for Spyro. By the time we got, spent a year on the game, he was Pete. It was real. I wanted to use Pete.
Is this Pete?
So that would have been. Actually, at this point, we didn't have any names for him.
Okay, well, this is the original art of the character who would become Spyro by you, and it is a little dragon guy. It's got a little small thing of smoke coming out of his mouth.
So fortunately, I'll say fortunately, they did not like my little dragon character. We brought in Charles Zimbalist, who's incredibly talented. Mm-hmm. Did a bunch of the Naughty Dog games, and I don't know what else to do for his resume, but really talented, really fast. So we brought him in, I think, just for an afternoon. And he just spit out this pile of drawings of a little dragon. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you've got this one here.
Oh, we do, yes.
Oh, yeah. So Charles left, and we started flipping through these sketches, and there was no one sketch where everyone went, yes, that's our little dragon. And so I took the ones we liked and went and photocopied them, and then I cut the head off this one and do this one off this one, and I think I blew the head up a little bit and some white out. We get rid of this and do this, and I tape them all together, and I bring that in.
Oh, sorry. We're scrolling through images here to get to that one. But first off, there's the thing for Pete the Dragon. I don't know why I remembered Bob. It clearly says Pete the Dragon there. But also some of those concepts with the Norks and things like that, and some things that made it in. Some other dragon concepts that were being thrown around.
These would have been the adult dragons.
Got it. But then we have finally the one that you just mentioned. This is working at now. It is it's Spyro as we know and love him, and it is, you can very clearly see the head is cut out from a separate sheet of paper than the body.
Yeah, and there's white out. He had little ridges.
It's not visible on this very low quality TV we found in the office because we wanted to do this in person, and we don't usually do in person podcasts. And this was the best quality thing I could find on like half an hour's notice. But there is, if you look at it in our digital library, there is noticeable white out. It looked like he had spines like going across his body. That was then whited out.
And you whited those out.
Yeah.
And so he did that, and showed that to everybody. Yeah, that's our little dragon.
Cool.
And so then I took that. So then I photographed. So that. So this was the very first image of Spyro.
Yeah.
Or Pete, of our little dragon.
Pete.
And so then I took that. And the other thing that a lot of people don't know is I took this and did up a color comp of it where he's green, because
Which we're seeing right here. Yeah, it's green dragon. It's and it's the same kind of like, yellow belly and brown horns, but he just is also kind of like a tealy green color.
Yeah.
It's just incredible looking at this, that like, I know this is not going to be like a classic character already. You know what I mean? Like this just being green, like just that change from green to purple.
It's huge. When we realized very quickly, because that was the other thing where, this would have been, so he was still green. I remember the very first time Al says, "Hey, I've got Pete up and running around."
Yeah.
And so it's just literally a green plane. I think it had a rough grass texture on it and like a little block in the middle of like some stonework, just a square that as reference point. And it was you were literally just running around circles, running around that thing. That's all there was to it. And you could play it for 20 minutes.
Didn't even need the ring splash. It was
didn't need a ring splash. Didn't need anything. You were just right. It was fun chasing your tail. And I remember thinking about it. I'm sure I probably said it out loud. It's like, if this is not a hit, it's our fault.
Yeah.
We screwed up because it's fun as is with no gameplay.
Man.
And so but very quickly we realized a number of things. One, if you had a little green dragon, most of the game, you're running around on green grass. Mm-hmm. And there was Gex. So you had a green gecko.
It was a real like green character period.
It was a green. You had Croc,
Gex, arguably whatever Frogger was at that point. There was
there was another one that I can't remember. It's like, okay, no, we can't have another green rep.
There were Muppets games. We can just throw that in there as well if we want to talk about green protagonists. Yeah,
let's see. And so that's where I sat down and just did a whole rainbow collection of Spyro in all different colors, because it had to look good. As just a raw character by itself, but also it had to work on an old, CRT?
Cathode ray tube, yes.
Cathode ray tube, okay. CRT monitors, which blew out certain colors like red, and other colors just didn't show up. So we had to see what's going to look good on television.
And that's another tape you just brought by that we have to digitize. It's called Rainbow Spyro, and it's just all the colors of what would be Spyro.
All the colors of him. Oh, unfortunately. Cool. This is where, we don't, you're rushed, you're in a hurry, is the original green I had him is not on that tape.
Oh, interesting.
Because it got overwritten by some other quick, dirty animation test we had to run. And I was like, here's a tape. Who cares?
You're not thinking about it.
We don't need it. We know he's, but anyway, so we went through all that and decided the purple was the color. Our only concern at the time with purple was Barney the Dragon.
I was about to say Barney, yeah.
Barney was huge at the time. I'm like, okay, was that going to be a problem? And I think I only ever once in like one article or one somewhere, somebody actually said that out loud.
It would have never occurred to me.
Yeah, honestly. It apparently it didn't anybody else. So that's it.
And look at that. Look at that mischievous face. That's not a Barney face. That's
I mean, there's too many angles. You know what I mean? Like Barney is just a very round guy.
Yeah. And so if we'd have been a little green dragon, a little red, he looked on the tests. There was a kind of a dark brick color. He looked awesome, but the reds blow out on TV, and also and then the black was once again, oh cool, he's a black dragon, but all the details get lost. And once again, if you had a red dragon or a black dragon, that's just a dragon.
Yeah.
You know that game with the little red dragon? No. You know the game with the little purple dragon?
Right. Oh, yeah. That's now
even if you don't play games, people, I know the game you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. Even we got behind you right now that just copy of US PlayStation Magazine. It's like right there. It's like so distinctive. It's like, we got purple dragon. Yeah. It's immediately recognizable.
Still, this is off topic. Or no, it's backing up a little bit. You just watched Sonic 3.
The movie, the new one.
And the first part of that, I was getting these weird, when they're talking about Team Sonic, I'm getting these weird shiveries, memories, feelings of like, holy crap, I was on Team Sonic. I literally, I can put that on my resume. I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at Tails going like, I'm kind of your godfather.
Yeah. That was drawn.
I made you a house and they tore it down and didn't let me put you in Hidden Palace.
That was that was the Destiny where he was created.
Yeah.
And it was this very, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
It's surreal.
Yeah, no.
Of watching something that's like, wait a minute, I was there.
It's a very expensive Hollywood movie, and it's like, oh, that little guy?
Yeah. It's
I remember that kid.
So...
But in addition, going back to Spyro, jumping back to Insomniac, in addition...
Back to the games that matter, Spyro.
We're not talking about Sonic here on this podcast, unless you're Robin talking about her Sonic dreams, which has happened multiple times in this podcast so far. In addition to doing the art for Spyro the Dragon, you also did some, I think this is a level design, perhaps, in Spyro?
Well, this is actually Mark Cerny. This is one of Mark Cerny and Michael John. I always get this. Sorry.
Sorry, Dave. Also, but
It's his fault for having two first names.
There we go. Yeah, blame it on there.
Yeah.
No, but they were the design designers. So this was one of Mark's levels, and so in the earlier days, it was literally graph paper taped together with pencil, and so then I would take that, photocopy it, and so this is one of Mark's levels for a Spyro 2 world. Skelos Badlands, which is definitely one of my favorite levels of all the Spyro levels I did.
Got it.
And this is just me colorizing it so I can differentiate between what's actual playable area and what's not.
Okay, yeah.
So when you say a level that you did, what does that mean?
So I did the 3-dimensional art.
Okay.
So I actually built the world and textured the world based on, if you look at the map here, for those of you listening, there's a map with lots of little numbers on it, pluses and minuses.
It's like paint by numbers, but for like a level. It's kind of the energy.
And so there's all these little numbers, and that's the elevation of that pathway or that platform. And there's also like little demarcations of enemies and what their what their path would be.
This scrolls very quickly.
And so very quickly, what you'd also do is you'd get this map and you'd very quickly just raw shapes, pull it up and get your elevations.
Right, so you just get the elevations and then you'd eventually start carving so that there's natural inclines.
You'd give that, they'd give you this, and as fast as you could, you'd bang this thing out just squares, just rough shapes, or rough shapes following their line work here on the map. Give that back to the designer. And that would go into the system. You could physically run around and play on. It's like, that jump is too big, or that jump is too simple, or that I can't see the enemy that I want to be. And so they would make tweaks, and then you take that and then start actually building real geometry and texturing real geometry.
I also just want to point out a little note I just saw that just cracks me up. It's a sentence that says, it's a little note pointing to something that says, "Wizard is antagonizing Bone Builder." And that's just a really funny sentence. I just wanted to call that out.
There's also shoot frog from below, frog in plain sight. Yeah.
Wait, but that's a note. It also says +3 meters height. So you're figuring out where you have to put the frog to.
So that's what this quick and dirty first pass would be. I wish seeing those somewhere. I know I kept it way back when. So Kid Chameleon, very first game, and Bruce Willis was the designer, and
not that Bruce Willis.
No. Bruce. No. Oh, my brain just went tumbleweed. Bill. Anyway, man, me and names. No, he gave me a breakdown for an animation sheet. Bill Willis. So no, he was the programmer.
Okay.
Well done.
Well done.
Well done. Well done. That never clicked after all these years.
You had to meet me.
Yeah. Anyway, he gave me this, to get back to my very pointless point, he gave me this one little breakdown sheet of an enemy for Kid Chameleon that was really limited number of frames you could use. And it was like, he wrote in it, "Writhing, seething death, 6 frames." And he's like, well, Bill, what? Anyway.
But you can have writhing or seething.
But not both for 6 frames.
Yeah. But you were working off of these maps, but you also did some of the, besides the 3D art, some of the environmental concept art, some of the character art. We're looking here at a design for the Fairy Eater, which was...
I was always sad that this guy didn't get used.
Yeah, this is unused. Okay.
He didn't get used. So my idea here was this is a big beast, kind of a cross between a big nasty dog and a bull. And he didn't attack Spyro. He went for Sparks.
Oh.
So that wasn't just one hit.
Yeah.
If he bit you. He bit however many lives Sparks had.
Interesting.
And he never got past the simple drawing.
But also, actually, we're going to kind of a little ahead a bit in a second of that one. But you did all that in Spyro. We had some other, environmental concept art as well. We had there's the it's not on here, but it was the Spyro texture Bibles and the things where it was just like here's what textures to use and what scenes. Was that? Did you make that, or was that given to you? What was
I think I did that for. It was definitely in place for Spyro 3. May have done it for Spyro 2, because as you're getting different artists in, you want to keep a contiguous look, at least relatively homogeneous look, and that has to do with texture, noise in the textures, and how certain things are, how certain objects are textured, so you put that together for the incoming artists.
Got it. That's what. But you were putting that together, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that was my.
I wasn't sure if you were receiving it versus.
Oh no, I put that together because I was kind of lead artist, art director. Titles were kind of weird. And then the one thing that on the Spyro games, it's just been in recent years where this is really. I'm starting to understand how much of an impact this had on the game and on people. Is the skies for Spyro? I remember the very first time. I was asked to do a sky, did not want to do it. Ted Price had done one or two, and it was tedious. The tools didn't really exist. For those of you who don't know how the skies were created, is they weren't painted. For memory purposes and processing speed, they were built out of polygons, out of triangles specifically, and each vertex, each corner of that triangle would be given a numerical value for a color. So if you made one corner blue and the other corner yellow, the computer would then gradate between there, and you'd get this gradation to a green and to the blue. Yeah,
it wasn't textures in the same way that like Mario's hat in Mario 64. It's not like a giant red texture that's just like, all right, this part is red, and then it figures out the rest from there. Right?
Yeah, so it does. And so by doing very carefully shaped and denser polygons and these little things, you could build these skies and clouds and mountains but the technology it was new. The tools didn't really exist. It was really crude, very labor intensive, and they really weren't. It was like, okay, that's really not very pretty, and I really didn't want to do it. Long story short, became my favorite thing to do. I loved doing the skies, and in the past few years, I've had people, either via YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and I get talking to people and communicating with people. And they're talking about that's what they remember from the game is the music and the skies. And a lot of people, so these are 35, 40-year-old people, men, women.
Yeah.
Remember them when they're, 6 or 8 years old. And sadly, too many of them will say, yeah, no, I grew up in not a good house. And I would play Spyro to get away. That was my escape. And a number of them have all said they all had a place in one of the worlds that they would go and sit.
Oh, wow.
And just listen to the music and look at the sky.
Man, you never know, just like one random bit of technical art you have to do, and then
it's
Didn't you mention to me at a previous visit that someone has a tattoo of one of your skies?
Oh yeah. It's a really well done tattoo. It's one of the skies, and then on top of that, because there's lots of Spyro tattoos, but this one's like that's my artwork. And I'm not saying that to claim it. I'm like, holy crap, someone's got my artwork on their body. But it's one of the skies, and then on top of that, it's a crystal dragon,
and you designed,
did the original sketch for the idea of the crystal dragon. I may have built the dragons. I can't remember if I did or not.
I believe we have that sketch of.
I think it should. It's in there somewhere, I believe.
It's like, every element of this was the thing I made.
Yeah, it's really like wow, and it's a really beautiful tattoo on top of all that. And actually, that was when I was commenting. Somebody had a YouTube channel where they're listing the skies, they're ranking the skies, and I commented about this tattoo, and she goes, "Oh, that's why I've got this rankings because I did that one for a friend, and I'm trying to decide which sky I want to do for myself now."
The Spyro skies community is very small.
It's but it's a friend of mine. I wish I knew how to say it in Japanese. There's a word that means reason for being or reason for living. I think it's reason for being, which is it's a Venn diagram with 4 circles. Something you're good at, something you enjoy doing, something that you can get paid for, and something that improves the world, enhances the world. And it's very rare that someone can do, has those 4 things. And I'm so very fortunate that a couple of times I've been able to say that now. But that's, I look at this and these stories about these people in the skies or just playing the game in general to get away from the world they were growing up in.
Yeah.
And then for those people that had wonderful lives, but just loved escaping into the games. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Some people who played Spyro had good lives too.
Had good lives, as I said, but yeah, and then so it's yeah, how many? Yeah.
That would be a wonderful note to end on, but we have more art to talk about. But look, this episode is going pretty long, but it's pretty special. So we're going to go kind of rapid fire through some of this next stuff. We're going to talk about projects that didn't happen, because a lot of things at Insomniac you did art for were either it was a thing in pre-production or it was an idea. And I just want to kind of get some of those thoughts on the record. The first here we have is art from this project called Girl with a Stick. This is the it's sort of like a village over a whirlpool. We have a colored version of that as well. It's these kind of spiky buildings. What was this project? What was your role on it?
This artwork, the black and white, the line work, the ink work was John Rairdin, who was an incredible artist. He just banging in ink. It's amazed me.
There's a lot of like cross hatching.
He was. And his stuff was. But this was this Girl with the Stick game, and it was beautiful. We spent like 8 months on it right after Spyro. Spyro 3. And gorgeous and beautiful. And this girl would run off the stick, and she had magic. So you find a spot and you'd bury the stick in a little thing and do magic. And
gave me very like Beyond Good and Evil energy looking at it. It was kind of that same kind of aesthetic.
But we went on, and I remember Ted finally came in one day, and we had a big company meeting. And I wish I had videotaped this level here with this hanging structure over the whirlpool of glowing.
You did the coloration of this.
I did the color work here. But this level I actually built as a was this a playable level or a test level? I can't remember. Gorgeous. Yeah. And I wish I had videotape of it, because it was absolutely beautiful. But Ted comes in and says, okay, good news and bad news. The bad news is we're canceling Girl with the Stick. The good news is we're canceling Girl with the Stick. Because everyone was kind of burned on it, and there was just this feeling of this is not the game. And
but there were other things that were not the game as well. Other things you mentioned you were just doing concept work for.
Yeah.
This one was interesting. It is a castle with eyeballs, and it's like the terrain, like the rocks are its legs, so it's like a castle standing up, like ripping itself out of the ground. You can see little debris falling away from it. What was this for?
For the longest time, I remembered this because this was in all the drawings for Ratchet and Clank. And I'm like, is this Ratchet and Clank's? Like, it doesn't fit.
A medieval castle, yeah. It
doesn't fit. And I don't particularly care for this drawing. It seems kind of silly. And it wasn't until not that long ago came across some YouTube video or somebody's going through like some old games at Insomniac that didn't ship. And can't remember the designer's name. Pitched an idea called Monster Knight. Knight with a K.
Monster Knight, okay.
Monster Knight. And the premise there is that your protagonist, your character, had all of his tools and weapons and armor are creatures. They're monsters.
Okay.
That he has befriended or whispered to or whatever. And so and that's all the power-ups are these different creatures that he's using. And as in this video, they're showing these little cuts of his design document. And as one of them slides by, there's the drawing of this walking castle.
You're doing the Leonardo DiCaprio, like, wait a second, pointing at the screen, like, wait.
Back up. There's the drawing. It's like, oh yeah, that was done for the night, Monster Night.
But that was just like another post-Spyro pitching a concept
once
idea.
Again, would have been a beautiful game. It would have been a really cool game.
Another piece of art, though, that this was another thing where this was also not Ratchet and Clank, but we're looking here at it's a little like kind of ratcheting looking guy, though. He's like a little lion guy wearing armor, and he's got these like colorful rings he's using, almost like the Discs of Tron kind of design. And there's notes here where it says martial art master, acrobatic, ambidextrous, prehensile tail. It got all the essentials, and energy manipulation. One of the things. So what was this guy? What was this concept?
This was either just as Ratchet and Clank was first being pitched, or right around there.
Yeah, I think it was like kind of concurrent with it. Yeah,
and this was just my idea for the next game of just this character that had these two magic hoops, and he had all these the abilities you just listed off, and he's okay. He's nothing great.
So was this another everyone go pitch?
Not so much.
Okay.
Because at this point, see, we did that.
Because you must have a lot of employees.
Yeah, at this point, there's probably 100 employees.
The house that Spyro built, yeah.
75 to 100 employees.
Yeah.
And so you were welcome to bring ideas, but they didn't have okay, we're going to take a week off work, everybody, and come back with an idea.
Mm-hmm. But it was an environment that encouraged bringing ideas? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
although that seemed to fade at about Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah.
Well, you left a few years after this art was done, but you did work on Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah.
We have some of that art here at the end. Again, environmental concept art. A lot of your Spyro sketches are similar. Is this Ratchet and Clank?
This is Ratchet and Clank.
Okay, good. I haven't actually played it, so I just wanted to make but
yeah. So this was just a picture. It's, the idea was that the different platforms you're running and jumping on is the planet. All the plants are these helium, hydrogen filled balloons lifting chunks of ground off and floating. And this probably comes from my love of Roger Dean's artwork back in the 70s.
Oh, right,
the Fragile, Yes album covers, and he had lots of floating planets and floating islands.
I'm curious what order these things came in, the order of operations here, because specifically we have some art, just flipping through here, some more Ratchet and Clanky art. There's this art of it's a city that's under siege by these floating ships, and then we also have the level design for that level. You can see here there's like outlines of the ship showing where they are, and this was also printed out graph paper that was taped together.
It's digital at this point.
But here it's digital.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a big upgrade.
Illustrator?
But we had to flatbed scan a bunch of stitched together printouts.
It's still stitched together. I just realized that's so much prettier than what nice job.
That's that photo merge in Photoshop, baby.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for doing that for us. But point being, so in this, did you pitch like, well, what if there's these ships and then they did a level, or what orders did this come in when you're making these?
All the above. Like the one drawing you just showed there, that's like these sailing ships and floating. This is actually very early. And there's another one that's about the same time, if not a little earlier. That was early concepts for Ratchet and Clank.
Okay.
Of just what's this game going to look like. And both those ones, Ted kicked back as to Spyro.
Okay, you can see that a little bit. It's a little steampunky in the look of it.
A little cute, a little bubbly, a little soft-edged, and that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to go more hard edge, a little more techno kind of cyberpunky-ish.
Right, which what the other designs were. There's a lot of kind of like Bubble City Jetsons kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess I was curious about that because in Spyro, it was a small team, and it's like, we'll have a volcano level. And then by this point, it is 100 people. There's more division of labor happening.
But it really was. There was a transition that I was really pushing because it was very kind of frustrating as an artist and for the art department of the game designers coming up with their ideas and their worlds and just saying, here's such and such world. Come up with something for it. And sometimes they're like, what? And so eventually we got where the artists would all get there and we would just do what looks cool. And then we would have a stack of drawings and we'd give those to the game designers and say,
okay,
find one you like that fits the game design you want. And so it was more collaborative.
Got it. Okay.
But that wasn't until like Ratchet 3 till we finally got that happening more.
Got it. And I think that's all we had in here for Ratchet and Clank art. But so that was around the time when you left Insomniac. That was 2005.
Yeah. So I left in 2005 because we had literally just finished Deadlocked. So the fourth Ratchet.
Oh right. Okay. Sorry. Right. Yeah. I was thinking of Disruptor again. For some reason we said Deadlock. That sounds like it should be a shooter. But
so I'm curious at this point, does the art that you have dry up because you are mostly digitally illustrating?
I was still doing everything. All my concept stuff was still old school pencil on paper,
which is why we have it in the first place. By the way,
I think that's by this point,
a lot.
Maybe you just didn't take it home.
More and more of the people I have. Let's just say. I tried to keep at that point. I'm actively trying to keep everything I'm drawing. And so whether it may have just sucked or it just got lost if I don't have stuff. And not everything always had a drawing. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, then I would just start building.
Yeah.
So
you don't always need concept art for yourself because you understand your own concept.
You're not trying to pitch it to somebody.
Yeah.
But you left Insomniac. I'm not sure if it's a story you want to tell on the podcast or not.
I mean, no, if we've got time.
Okay,
No, it's the last couple of years in Insomniac, I was starting to have kind of issues because it was this whole that whole imposter syndrome thing that everyone has at one level or another.
You designed Spyro.
Yeah. And so, I'm here for a reason. But as things were moving ahead, I remember maybe Spyro 1 was, it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'm at my desk and maybe it was 2 anyway, because I remember which desk it was at. Anyway, 11 o'clock at night, I'm behind schedule. I'm on my work. And Ted comes in and says, hey, can I see you in my office? And I'm like, I'm dead. I'm so busted because I'm so far behind schedule. And Ted brings me into his office and says, Craig, we couldn't do this without you. Here's a raise.
Well, great.
I'm like, oh, cool. Went back to work. And then
what does this actually mean?
And then jump ahead, probably in the next Spyro game, and once again, late at night, working behind schedule. Ted, Craig, can I see you in my office? I'm like, oh man, I'm so busted again. And I go in, Craig, couldn't do this without you. I mean, literally saying we couldn't do this without you. Here's a raise. Great, sure. Wonderful. And not jump ahead, so we're definitely Spyro 3. And middle of the day this time. And, hey, Craig, can I see you in my office? And I'm like, oh, I'm getting another raise.
You show up like that, like money.
And I walk in, and he said, closes the door. And, Craig, if you're late on this level again, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to have to fire you. And I'm like, oh. Okay, well, I'll put some extra hours in and get caught up. And I left and I went to lunch. And I'm sitting there at lunch, and all of a sudden I went, what the?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, did Ted just threaten to fire me because I'm behind schedule? So I went back to his office and he goes, yeah, I'm surprised you didn't react. I go, yes, because it's asinine. And I remember going and talking to Mark Cerny right then and said, hey, because I really wanted to just quit right there on the spot. And I should have. And I went to talk to Mark, and Mark checked around and he goes, yeah, you actually are making about 20% more than anybody else in with your job title in the industry. Okay. But anyway, that was just kind of this constant. Oh, well, then the next level I did was, the firing, though, that wasn't 3. The firing was Ratchet and Clank.
I was going to say, I feel like you wouldn't have stayed on for additional games at that point.
So, the firing was, I remember, so the firing was Ratchet and Clank because, or the threatened to be fired, because the next level I came back with was Metropolis, which became the flagship level for the entire series.
Yeah.
And it was a level that when they first showed the map, these taped together pieces of graph paper that filled the floor because it was like 30 or 40% bigger than the max we'd said it could be. And I go, Ted, we can't, this is too big. It's like, do it. Okay. So I did it. And I remember Ted just kind of was like, yeah, you're good. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But those seeds were planted and whatever. And so I don't know how much of it's in my head and how much was really them.
But your perception of a relationship like that changes. And
and this distinct feeling of they really are pressuring me, because also I kept losing responsibilities each project.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like it was interesting as you were talking about Spyro, like you were starting to really specialize in like color was starting to become a thing, which is like, again, you have hundreds of people working at a company versus like we're 4 people. And
when they hired John Ferrarito, it was like, okay, well, they definitely wanted to give John responsibility. He was definitely capable of it. And so he and I I remember having the meeting and talking, we split the art direction kind of jobs. And he was over the design and the physical look, and I was over color and other aspects. And so we were working together as kind of co-art directors. But that continued down the road. I kept, and it wasn't because I did poorly on the previous project, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I mean, at one point, my bonuses were less than it was supposed. No, I went in for a raise and got 0 raise, not a small raise, not a normal raise. I got 0 raise.
And I can't help but feel that all of these things, like the responsibilities getting split, the not getting raises, like on their own might have been okay, right? But at this point, you just kind of have to feel like there's eyes on you.
Yeah.
There's kind of a paranoia, I would think.
And it seems there's a point where it's like, oh, my relationship with my work has changed now.
And I had made the mistake of thinking of Insomniac as family. I'd been there since the beginning. I was the first employee. Yeah. I remember we had a big company cruise. We cruised down to Mexico, and Ted had a whole kind of flashback moment of talking about everybody and the progress of the company.
We don't have any pictures of the cruise. That wasn't part of it. No.
And so he comes up and he just kind of leapfrogged. He just stepped over start beginning at the company, and after a few minutes later that evening, Al Hastings comes up to me and says, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that we wouldn't be here if it if it wasn't for your contributions."
Yeah.
So thank you, Al. Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, so it's getting worse, and I remember actually I'd forgotten all about this. I found an old letter where I got a pay cut.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The brain. I had forgotten that one. But so now we finished Deadlocked, and we're now all the people who've been doing PS2 games and the Ratchet and Clank games are now having to come up to speed for the PS3. And I remember Chad and one of the other, I can't remember if he was a programmer or one of the other, I think he was one of the programmers, was showing us the new tech for how the PS3 software is going to work and how we're going to create the worlds. And so I learned all the knew everything to do. Like, okay, great. And I turned around and I taught my team, okay, here's how we're doing all this. And then I went back to my computer to do it and couldn't. I would sit there and stare at it, and I couldn't make the simplest decisions of, well, do I want 10 polygons in this, or do I want 20 polygons on this?
Are you dealing with like shaders at that point too? And
so you started doing, more and more was starting to be done in the computer. And but it was just like the really basic stuff, like how many polygons do I want in this square?
Yeah.
Like how smooth do I want this curve? I'm staring. So like 2 weeks later,
it's a different skill set than this. Yeah. That's
But it wasn't even that. I just taught everyone how to do it.
Yeah.
So it was just a step of the 3D modeling that I'd been doing, but all of a sudden I couldn't, just the simplest decisions, I couldn't.
I mean, would you call it burnout?
Burnout, yeah, kind of a writer's block.
Yeah.
I've since discovered that I'm ADHD. By the way, Adderall is a wonderful drug. And so it's the inability to make a decision because you've got too many choices. And on top of insecurities and thinking they want me fired, and they, because they literally say, oh man, they could replace me with 3 kids out of college for what they're paying me.
Right.
And I get called into the office, and this time we are. You can't. Oh, yeah. You can resign and get half of your bonus, for Deadlocked, or we can fire you right now.
Jeez.
And so at the time I thought it's like, if I'm burned out, that's all it is, and I'll take 6 months off or a year off, and I'll come back to another industry. Mm-hmm. Or somebody else in the industry. Mm-hmm. And a year later, it's like, no. And because I lost the ability to draw. Mm-hmm. Even traditional pencil and paper or painting, I lost. Wow. I my brain would just spin out, and ended up on disability.
Dang.
And because I couldn't work, my brain would just work. And fortunately, around 2016. End of 2016, a friend recommended, hey, why don't you come work at the Children's Museum with me? And started doing that.
Oh, I sent another map. Wait a second, there's more. There we go.
Oh, there we go. So and I found working at the Children's Museum that all these little things that spin my brain out, I either don't, those triggers aren't there, or if they are, they're very manageable. It's like, oh, okay, that's not going to bother me today.
And I hadn't heard that story about, what you were doing, teaching the team, to not being able to do it. And I don't know if there's a parallel there between you are teaching now, like you are teaching art, and that's.
Yeah. And so it's I started to realize, hey, I can draw at work. What's going on here?
It's fog lifting, yeah.
Yeah, and part of it was that I'm not expecting to keep anything. I'm just banging this. I've got like 5 minutes, and because I'm working.
Yeah,
and so
for folks who are, again, that's right, we have a audio listeners as well. Yeah, but this is it's a drawing of a dragon. It looks like it was done in marker, and like you said, drawn kind of quickly. Bears a resemblance. It's like as if Spyro had grown up to be the dragon who was fighting in the Civil War. It's like the size and scope what we're talking about here.
Those are Craig Stitt claws. Like I've seen those claws on the
we saw those on the Christmas card. Yeah,
those are still the claws. Yeah, maybe I should span out, expand a little bit. Yeah, no, I do, and like right now, I'm doing. I do a camp counselor at the museum here in San Francisco, and
which museum is that?
Bay Area Discovery Museum, and mostly what I do, I'm also on the floor, but mostly what I do is I'm a counselor for their week-long camps, and at the end of the week, we're always doing like these little thank you cards for the kids, and the idea of like writing the note really stressed me out for some reason. I mean, I am a horrible speller. And so I made a deal with my co-counselor. Now everyone I'm working with, like, tell you what, you write the cards and I'll do up a nice little card. The artwork you make, as opposed to just a piece of paper folded on, use that instruction paper. And the first one was very simple. And then the next one's a little more complicated. And the next one's a little more complicated. And the one I just finished was like, I'm spending way too much time on these because I've got to do like anywhere between 10 to 20 of them.
The kid chameleon of thank you cards was the just ballooning and ballooning. Just
ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. But I look at it because I'm not getting paid for that time. But that's my art therapy.
Yeah.
That's where I'm tapping back into it and painting again and drawing again. And
well, it just sounds like you're almost reclaiming it from something.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Man.
So.
Well, actually, and a lot of the art that you did for those camps and all that is also part of the collection. And that's kind of a transition, I guess, out is that I don't know when this podcast episode is going live. The hope is that by the time it's live, we will have Craig Stitt's collection available in our digital library, which includes everything we've seen or talked about here, but also other projects that you worked on during those periods. And then also there is a section of things you did afterwards. And, for things, we usually try to like focus our scope on video games, but it is like, well, we have art across your entire career going from 1990 up until now. And it's like, I hadn't thought about it until Frank, when he mentioned seeing the Craig claws there, which I think is now the term for that, where it's like, no, this is representative of your.
I hadn't noticed that either. Those are my claws.
But it's like, it's representative of your body of work, and it shows how these things transition and change over time. So if you're interested in this, this is all going to be accessible at archive.gamehistory.org as part of the Craig Stitt collection. Yeah. We're really glad you brought this stuff to us. We were able to digitize it because I think it's
thank you. I want to make sure that this gets out there, and I want I look back at the artists who inspired me. Names are just having a hard time today. Ralph McQuarrie.
I was going to say was it Dave again, but yes, Ralph McQuarrie.
Ralph McQuarrie and Frank Frazetta and was it Matthew, somebody from that did these cool 70s stuff.
And you mentioned the Roger Dean. Yeah.
But it's interesting, as you said that, of seeing their early work, I would love to see like Ralph McQuarrie's work from like elementary school.
Yeah.
In high school. I would love to see what was he drawing when he was 10 years old. I would love to see that.
I never thought about that until now.
I hadn't either until you said that.
There must be some Star Wars fan or someone out there who's into that. If not, go Google that right now, folks. That's your homework assignment from the camp counselor. But I think we're done here at the Video Game History Hour. Craig, thank you so much for coming by for this episode.
My pleasure, absolutely.